Does anyone have a teaching verse they'd like to read? I was wondering if someone would take up my offer of reading a teaching verse, since I ask every week. Well, I've been asking every week, haven't I, recently? Sarah? Yes, please.
Hello. Hi, Tom. Hi, everyone. I've got two verses here from Guru Ramana Vachana Mala by who I believe is Lakshmana Sarma, or he's translated it anyway. Is it written by Ramana? Was it?
So the text, Guru Ramana Vachana Mala, is a collection of sayings or teaching statements that were given or spoken by Bhagavan Ramana. And they were recorded by two people. They were recorded in another text, Guru Vachka Kovai, by Murugana, and then separately, Lakshmana Sarma, who wrote under the pseudonym Who, he noted down some teachings of Bhagavan's that he heard. And the text Guru Ramana Vachana Mala is a collection of Bhagavan's sayings. Most of them are from Guru Vachka Kovai. So, and some of them are extra ones that are not in Guru Vachka Kovai. They're not found, often not found anywhere else, but they're sayings or teachings that K. Lakshmana Sarma heard or witnessed. And so what in this text, what Lakshmana Sarma has done is he's arranged some verses from Guru Vachka Kovai, which were written down by Murugana, and added some of his own verses that he heard and arranged them in his own way, presumably with Bhagavan's blessing. And he's translated them himself into English because he was English speaking. Now, it's a highly reliable and authoritative collection of teachings because Lakshmana Sarma had a long-standing, close relationship with Bhagavan for, I think, over 20 years. And he also had a close relationship with Murugana, who recorded Bhagavan's teachings in the text Guru Vachka Kovai. And he spoke English and various other languages fairly fluently, including classical language of Sanskrit. And he was the only person who received private tuition on some of Bhagavan's highest teachings as recorded, or as written by Bhagavan in the 40 verses on reality, Uladu Narpadu, the 40 verses on reality. This is a highly authoritative collection, and it was published within Bhagavan's lifetime. So there are a whole host of reasons why this collection of teachings is highly authoritative, meaning that it's less likely to be distorted teaching. Because as soon as you hear the teaching, the ego distorts it in most cases. As soon as the teaching's heard, the mind distorts it. So when you record, or when one records the teaching given by the teacher, almost always there's distortion there right from the outset. That is minimized in this case. And Muruganar, who was also self-realized, the reason Guru Vachka Kovai, recorded by Muruganar, is such an authoritative text is not only because Muruganar had a long-standing relationship with Bhagavan over 20 years, also over 20 years, but he also was self-realized. And that means the distortion disappears, because in self-realization, the distortion of the teaching by the ego no longer occurs. The teaching can never fully be given in words, to be honest. So there's always a distortion in the sense that we're pointing to something that which cannot be fully explained in verbal teachings, but it's some of the closest things we can get are these kinds of scriptures and texts, in my view. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. So this is verse 107. Since God is himself the self in the heart, therefore constant meditation on the truth of oneself is the devotion that is most pleasing to God. And verse 108. Since his name is I, the seeker who constantly practices meditation of the I will be taken inside to the source of being, the world of God.
Thank you, Sarah. Would you please be able to repeat them? Do you mind if you do? Thank you.
Verse 107. Since God is himself the self in the heart, therefore constant meditation on the truth of oneself is the devotion that is most pleasing to God. And 108. Since his name is I, the seeker who constantly practices meditation of the I will be taken inside to the source of being, the world of God.
Thank you, Sarah. Very potent, direct verses. When I hear them, there's a clarity of teaching there, and a unification of the path of bhakti, the path of devotion, and the path of knowledge, path of self-inquiry. The theistic path that talks about God, and the non-theistic path that doesn't necessarily have to talk about God. Did you have any questions on these verses, Sarah?
They stood out to me. I should have said, actually, they're in chapter 2, the quest, section 6, devotion.
Mm.
And it seemed to me that they were both saying, basically, you are God. And so if you meditate on yourself, you will discover that. And when I read them for the first time, I really felt it, just for a second or two. And then, of course, the mind came straight back in. But it was nice just to feel it just for a second. And my mind reacted in two ways. At first, it went, well, that's good. You're not this awful limited body mind thing with all its problems and so on. So that it was a sort of mental sense of relief, and then came in a mental confusion that was just like, wait, what? But anyway, ever since then, I've been rereading them, and I find them very soothing and reassuring. But I'd love for you to tell me more about them if you're able to, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for reading those beautiful verses, for choosing them, for reading them and for sharing what you've just shared. That's lovely. I think the first thing I'd like to say is, we talk about how the teachings are in silence and the importance of silence. And that's very true. That's very true. Because of the strength of ignorance, the strength of our minds, the strength of our egos, the strength of ego, the strength of ignorance. We don't have to say our ignorance or our ego, the strength of ego, the strength of ignorance. Because of that, these written texts, these pithy, concise verses are extremely powerful. They're potentially extremely powerful antidotes to our own thoughts and thought patterns and beliefs. They can nullify wrong ways of thinking, as it were. And they can inspire us and shift us and transform us, nudge us into glimpses and more. So for most of us, most seekers, reading these texts regularly has huge value, because unless you're in silence, you are reading your mind, you're reading your ego, you're listening to your mind, you're listening to your ego, you're listening to your mind's thoughts, the thoughts churned out by the mind. Whereas when we read these scriptures, these texts, we're reading Bhagavan's thoughts, Bhagavan's teachings. And what would you rather listen to? Your own teachings, which, if you're seeking, are pervaded and permeated by ignorance and deception and illusion. You can listen to that figuratively, or actually we can say this is Satan's voice. It's the voice of the devil, keeping us in temptation, keeping us in the world, preventing us from realizing what we actually are: divine being, heaven, the eternal, the absolute. That which prevents us from realizing what we already are, always, and already are, that is Maya. That is the devil. That is Satan. And that which keeps us in Maya is also Maya, or the devil, or Satan, or ego, or ignorance. These are the same thing. When we read Bhagavan's teachings, these give us the opportunity to come out of that. So reading these scriptures has huge value. If it's a choice between listening to your own thoughts, listening to Satan's teaching, or listening to Bhagavan's teaching, choose Bhagavan's teaching. Choose his words, his thoughts. If you're able to. You won't always be able to, right? If you're able to. And if you're able to abide in the silence, then you don't need to listen to either of these teachings, because these teachings ultimately are just helping you abide as the self, do self-inquiry. Second thing I like to say is Sarah mentioned that these verses were under a section called the quest. And this is very typical language of who, or Lakshmana Sarma. He often called self-inquiry the quest, the search. The word quest is quite an archaic word, isn't it? Quest, you're searching for something, you're trying to discover. It's a voyage of discovery. And I like that, because we're not trying to transform ourselves into God or into Superman or Superwoman or Wonder Woman. We're not trying to transform ourselves into a super person, an enlightened being. What this teaching says, and what your heart actually says, if I suggest your heart says this already, is that you are divine now. But you're not realizing it because you're caught up in imagination, in delusion. But you can search for what you are. You can throw away the veil, throw away that which covers your true identity. And that search is the quest, self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is a quest to discover what you actually are already. Not to transform yourself into anything, but just to clearly identify what is. And yes, the verses give a profound teaching that's very simple, which is the heart of the teaching, which is that the God that you may consider to be outside of you is actually within you. That's the first part. A God which you think is over there somewhere outside of you, maybe in the heavens, in the clouds, wherever you may picture God to be, maybe all around you, maybe outside of you and within you, but apart from you in some way as well. Many people say, oh, God is everywhere. He's within me. He's outside of me, but they still conceive of God as being something apart from them. This teacher says God is within you. And then it becomes even more radical. And again, your heart can confirm this as being true, I suggest. That's for you to verify and validate. But the second thing the teaching says is that God is not just within you, but he's within you and he is you. You are he. He is you. He is I. His name is I. And it's not that he says, oh, hello, my name is I. That's my name. Hi, I, it's my name. That's what he is. His being throbs and pulsates with this name, I. It's a nameless name. It's not a verbal spoken name. And when you discover what you are, you simultaneously discover what God is. Not because you read it in a book, not because you heard some person say this or that, not because you're brought up to believe certain things, you're indoctrinated in some sort of theology. No, it becomes your direct experience. It isn't the thing that's strange for the mind is that it's not an experience for the person. It's not something that a body mind can experience. Body mind is a part of the illusion, part of the delusion. It's something, we talk about words, here words fail. Words like experience or knowledge or intuition, all these words fail. It's just being that which you are, that which he is. And this is the essential teaching in the Upanishads. And Bhagavan tells us, and you can read for yourself, this teaching is in all the great traditions. That God is I am. I am he is I. And anything else is a gross, a huge mistake, misunderstanding, misapprehension, delusion, and a falsehood. And the realization of this is just supreme love, total happiness and bliss and love. Beyond these words, love, happiness, bliss, you cannot put it into words, cannot be understood or explained by the mind, cannot be known by the individual body-mind entity, which is actually an imagined entity. The whole thing is made up, fiction. But this is only discovered when you discover your identity. Again, you don't discover it, just the words we use. This teaching is only given to those who are interested. This teaching is not to be foisted upon anyone. If somebody else believes in God external to them, maybe very external to them, like far off somewhere else in the clouds, or in the cosmos somewhere else, or they believe that God is external to them but much closer, they still believe that God is apart from them, then let them be. We're not here to try and convert anybody. When people are ready, they will attract this teaching into their life naturally when they're ready. So this teaching is not to be foisted or forced onto anyone. But if somebody is interested, genuinely interested, not just academically interested, then we can share this teaching and it will give rise to fruit. It will come to fruition. Otherwise, it won't. Because the person has to be interested in this, open to it. But it's an amazing teaching. It's a beautiful teaching. It's a highly radical teaching. It's an open secret. It's here. We all can intuit this for ourselves, know this for ourselves, as a matter of direct knowledge, direct experience, without needing any intermediary, any secondary thing at all. We can know this ourselves. All other forms of knowledge require some kind of intermediary, such as some kind of instrument, maybe a sense organ to know something, to see something. If you see something is round or square, you need your eyes to see that, or you need your sense of touch to feel the shape of something. Or you need your mind to know that Paris is the capital of France, for example. Or you need a telescope to be able to see how the planets orbit the sun. So all knowledge ordinarily needs a means of knowledge, an instrument, an intermediary. So it's dependent on something else, right? The knowledge of the shape of something, if you remove somebody's eyes, they can no longer have that knowledge because they can't see. If you remove another sense organ, you can no longer have that knowledge that was given to you through those sense organs. If you remove the brain or the mind, the thinking process, your memory or your knowledge that Paris is the capital of France is no longer there because it's dependent knowledge. It's dependent upon things, dependent upon the body, the mind, the sense organs. If your knowledge is dependent on using telescopes and rulers, then you remove those objects, you cannot, the means to knowledge has been removed, so the knowledge is no longer present. Self-knowledge, divine knowledge, spiritual knowledge requires no intermediary. Doesn't require the body, doesn't require the mind, doesn't require the world, doesn't require any instrumentation, doesn't require any sense organs. It is just what you are. And in fact, when you remove all these things from your experience and you go towards what you are, this is when you discover what you are. This is the meaning of the quest.